Okay, three, two, one. Well, welcome to my dear friend Delia Coffey, who has agreed to speak with us today. Delia, welcome. She's all the way in the Commonwealth of Dominica. It's 9 a.m. in the morning as we record this, and she looks as bright as a daisy. Fresh,
Ooh,
bright
I
as a
thought I
daisy.
thought I'd look more like a dahlia.
All right, I'm talking about a daisy. So you're looking very well. And before we go a step further, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you very much, and same to you.
Thank you very much. So, Delia, you are the first person I've spoken to from the Commonwealth of Dominica. And in fact, you are, I believe, the first person I've spoken to who lives outside of the UK environment, outside of this country. So it's lovely to have you, despite our sort of time differences. Um, and really, this is just an opportunity to speak with you about your work, about your career. Um, I met you many years ago when we were both a little younger, but over time we've remained sort of in contact with each other, and I know that your ever changing identities in terms of work and what you do in terms of cultural awareness for the local community are really things to be admired. So I'm really glad you've taken some time out to speak with us. But tell us a bit about who Delia Coffey is.
Okay, Delia Coffey is the third child of 10 of her mother.
Well,
And yes, in the Caribbean, we love big families. And she's actually married to quite a handsome gentleman, Mr. Weeks, who everybody in Dominica and by extension the Caribbean know about because he's a career police officer for the past 34 years.
um,
So because I actually came into my own before I got married to him, then I took a decision to keep my maiden name
mhm,
as part of my name. So I'm now Delia Coffey Weeks.
right.
Because some people, if you would say to them Delia Weeks, they have absolutely no idea who you're talking about.
Mhm.
And then when they see Delia Weeks, they're like, oh, Delia Coffey Man. So just to avoid too much confusion, I now go by Delia Coffey Weeks.
Lovely.
I was a teenage mom. I had my baby at the age of 17. But because I was a bright child, I was already finished with high school. And so I'm one of the lucky few who was able to just consider that a little hiccup. And so I moved on from there to being a teacher.
Okay.
And you would know once a teacher, always a teacher. So I've taught at the primary school level, I have taught at the secondary school level. I also do some teaching for UWI Open Campus Dominica.
Yes.
So that's at the tertiary level. And in my work as an agriculturist, I consider myself a teacher in a classroom without walls.
Yes. Yes.
And so the interaction with the different people, I consider working with people not just being subject specific, but you're dealing with an entire person.
Mhm.
And so in my dealings with children, with parents, with farmers, whoever, then sometimes I have to put my own focus on the back burner because they have more pressing issues.
Mhm.
And that dovetails into my being a social worker,
Mhm.
trying to attend to the needs of the people that I deal with in all their various forms.
Wow. Wow. What part of Dominica are you from, Delia?
I am from the culturally vibrant community of Grand Bay,
Mm-hmm.
and many people they are afraid of Granby because somehow they have this feeling that Granby is uncontrollable and the people are aggressive and all of that until they get in there.
Mm-hmm.
And when they experience the warmth of our embrace, then they don't want to leave.
Lovely.
So it's in the south of the island.
Mm-hmm.
The language of life is Creole,
Mm-hmm.
although we were forbidden from speaking the language. But that is what you heard all around you until you got to primary school, and then you began learning English formally.
Right.
So although I never spoke Creole as a child, I understood everything.
Of course.
And then once I became an adult, then I embraced the opportunity. And right now I'm actually imparting that knowledge to other people who want to be more steeped in their culture.
Lovely. Lovely. So let's go back a little bit. You started by sharing with us that you started in teaching. Um, Take us through how that kind of led you to social work in one sense, because even in terms of what you were saying about being an agriculturalist, I got a sense that, well, as you indicated, really, that it wasn't just a one kind of narrow way of dealing with people. You had to look at people holistically, and presumably you're meaning um, farmers and so on who you came into contact with. They would have other concerns, other challenges, other issues. Is that, am I on the right?
Yes, you're definitely on the right track. And I will tell you, my teaching experience exposed me to children with different needs.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I taught in the primary school, I remember struggling through really teaching at the infant level. And it was a bit of a problem because I had never been trained to deal with little children.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt to myself that this was the foundation of their education. So I should not really mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this little girl in my class who was very well dressed. She had knobs at the root of every hair and ribbons on the end. So her head constantly looked like a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
So it meant that she had a lot of stuff. But she was very sadly lacking in the emotional attention that she required.
Wow.
So imagine me being class teacher, doubting my ability to impart sufficient knowledge to these children, and this little one just popping out of the blue. Miss, my mommy called last night. Miss, we got a barrel. And I'm like, I began getting frustrated
Mm-hmm.
with this because I am struggling here and you're preventing me from teaching the other students. And I got to the point, in fact, the classroom was very close to the road. And the idea entered my mind that I'm going to throw this child out the window onto the street. And when logic came back, I'm like, Delia, you
Thank
cannot
goodness.
do that. It was just a passing thought.
Yeah. You're allowed those passing thoughts, yeah.
Right. And so I said, she has a problem and you have to find a way to deal with it. So I moved her from where she sat and I put her close to my desk. And during my teaching, I would just pet her, I would just touch her.
Mm-hmm.
And she settled down because she was beginning to get that attention that she craved.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, though, I didn't remain there very long, but I did pass on the information to the person who would be the new class teacher. So hopefully they would have helped her.
So what you were essentially picking up, that it was that her mother was absent, she was
Yes.
away, and that
And she was sending lots of stuff.
material
So
stuff.
physically she was taken care of. But what the child needed in terms of her personal development, the hugging and the kissing and the emotional attachment,
Absolutely.
it was sadly lacking. So she had to find a way to draw attention to herself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is me, a very young girl, inexperienced, trying my best and struggling through it. So from there, I started seeing my students as not just children in the classroom
Yes.
that I am teaching a subject to, So I began analyzing the composition of my class.
Yes.
And so there were obviously students who you could just give them the assignments and they would work through it.
Mm-hmm.
There were those who were struggling. And then those who were a bit disruptive, these were the ones that I paid more attention to because I was more focused on why are you disrupting my class? Mm-hmm. So I had to come up with different techniques to deal with them. And I'm just doing this shooting blind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from intuition, no doubt.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I remember I moved to teaching bigger children, like teenagers, at another primary school. And there was this boy. He was disruptive. But I realized he was trying to hide the fact that he could barely read. Wow. And he was about 13. And he had gone through the school system because at the time, the primary schools operated as automatic promotion. Mm-hmm. So you would just finish one year and then you move up to the next class. You move up to the next class until you're out of the school system. And that is why sometimes we had children who would finish primary school and they could not do anything more than write their names. Wow. But for me, that was not satisfactory. So I realized, okay, you're being disruptive. I said, let me use a bit of reverse psychology on him. I appointed him as the assistant teacher. And Sylvia, what a transformation. Mm-hmm. He took on this thing. He felt important. Mm-hmm. And the children would take a chance to whisper to each other while I was in the classroom. If I had to step out, you would swear there was nobody in the classroom because there was martial law. Mm-hmm. So when I came back to the classroom, I'd maybe gone to the principal's office or so, he would give me a very badly written list of names. Mm-hmm. Of who had spoken and who threw a piece of paper across the classroom and all of that. But he took his notes.
Wow.
And I kept him so close that he learned to read. Nice. He developed right in front of me. And the satisfying thing about it, I am talking about somewhere between 1984 to 1986. Wow. So these people are now adults.
Yes.
Their parents have never forgotten Miss Coffee. Most of them, without me bribing them or anything, they will still say to this day, this was my best teacher. Mm-hmm. Because I dealt with them as human beings. And I remember I was walking through town one day and this vehicle stopped in the middle of the road. Vehicles are packed all the way behind him and he couldn't care less. He's sitting in the vehicle with his wife and he says to the wife, this is the woman I told you, the only teacher who beat me in primary school. But he loves me. He's now a pastor.
Wow.
He's now into construction. And he insists on calling me Miss. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. After all of these years, and he's forever grateful that I did not give up on him.
Wow. Wow.
And then sometimes it was troubling that because of the way that I dealt with the children in the classroom, they carried home the messages. So parents started coming to me. Right. And they're like, Miss Coffee, you have to help me. Because my daughter, I cannot speak to her, I cannot. And so they kept telling me what problems they were having at home in controlling the children. But everything they had at home is Miss Coffee, Miss Coffee, Miss Coffee. And Doc, I started investigating. I guess I'm a little bit of a nosy packer. And some of the
curious,
things...
Delia, curious.
Okay, language is everything. And some of the things that I found out, they were very disheartening. Mm. And it was embarrassing for me to deal with them. How do I explain to a parent that your 13 or 14-year-old daughter does not respect you because she is in a relationship with your live-in boyfriend?
Wow.
And I have no exposure to counseling or anything like that.
Mhm.
But I realize the people are struggling.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that I can do to help them, then I had to find a way.
Wow.
And I guess all of that is coming from the fact that I grew up in a very large family. We were far from rich,
Mhm.
so things were very tight, but we were brought up with certain values
Mhm.
where you're supposed to look out for everybody, you're supposed to share what you have, and not feel any way if somebody is worse off than you. The little that you have may
Mm.
actually save their life.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the foundation.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, what I'm picking up, obviously, as you're speaking there, is your sort of great love of working and helping others, working with people, understanding children and young people. Um, how did things progress from, or progress, move on from teaching to agriculture? I got that in the right order.
Yes, it was actually something that started as a joke and then it blossomed. So at that time, I was teaching at the secondary school level, and there was this scholarship that was being offered, but the person who wanted to go to study, he did not have mathematics as a subject.
Right.
And so he was lamenting the fact, I would have loved to do this, but I don't have math.
Mhm.
So Delia the clown says to him, but I could lend you my maths and you could go ahead and do it. So he in turn says to me, but Delia, you're right. Why don't you apply to do the program? So I'm like, what program are you talking about? Because I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Incidentally, at the time, I am teaching agricultural science. I'm preparing students for their GCE examinations
Yes.
in agricultural science. So I said to him, okay, give me the information. And it's like a few days before the end of school. So I applied for this thing, sent it off, and forgot about it. I went to Martinique for summer vacation,
Hmm.
and my mom calls me up. And she's like, Delia, you have this letter from government. So I'm like, okay, open it. So she does. And she says, you applied for a scholarship? I'm like, scholarship? So I said to her, read it to me. Let me hear what it says. Congratulations, you've been successful and whatever, whatever. So I got the scholarship. So I had to cut short my vacation to come home to put my business in order.
Mm.
And I went off to Trinidad to study for 2 years and got my diploma in general agriculture.
Mm.
And when I came back, I went back into teaching because there was not a position for me at the time with the Ministry of Agriculture, but I was persistent.
Yes.
So I taught for 2 years after I came back from studying, but somewhere in the second year, I got accepted into that ministry and I've been there for the past 30 somebody years.
Wow.
Don't try to calculate my age. I'm younger than I look.
I would never try to do that, Gina. Believe me. Oh, okay. So, wow, that's a long tenure. Uh,
Yeah.
so summarize for us then what has happened to you in that space, because I must confess I hadn't realized you were so steeped in the world of agriculture. I've always seen you as someone who is working in some sort of allied profession regarding social work, or someone who is an avid advocate of culture.
Well, Sylvia, the thing about it is,
A
for
lady of many
me,
talents.
yes, for me, working in agriculture was where I moved my teaching from inside the classroom to
Yes,
outside.
yes, yeah, I hear.
And I got the opportunity to interact with people at different levels.
Mm.
So you had the professionals who spoke a particular language, down to the grassroots person who could not speak one word of English.
Wow.
So because I was from Granby, I was very well placed to communicate with those people who spoke only Creole.
Mm-hmm.
And the push of the ministry at the time, I was employed as an extension officer, frontline extension officer.
Yeah.
So we were more focused on knowledge transfer.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go to the farms, do the field visits, notice what the farmers are doing, and advise them on how to adapt their activities
Mm-hmm.
so that they would be more productive.
Wow. Okay.
And then I found out that sometimes, especially when we were doing one-on-one visits, we could not get the message across if the person had something else uppermost in their minds. So me again, being the curious person that I am,
Mm-hmm.
I would forget what it is that I came to do. And I would say, Doc, it seems as if you have something on your mind.
Okay.
And so we would discuss. And I would try to help in my own little way. And once we had addressed that issue, then we could then move on to what it is I came to do.
So invariably, the issue would be of a personal, emotional, or family
Yes,
nature. Okay,
yes,
that's what
yes.
we got you.
And then the thing about it is, I realized from very early that it didn't make sense me trying to teach them anything or tell them anything if they're preoccupied with something else.
Yes.
And so I became their confidant. They would tell me everything, things I didn't want to know. But
You couldn't help
you're
it.
available.
Yeah.
You're available.
Yep.
And
Yep.
let me tell you something. You have to adjust your actions to what is going on.
Yes.
So imagine you get on the farm and you're not a drinker of alcohol, but the farmer offers you a shot of rum before he serves you a meal, and you cannot say no. Unless you're on medication. They will respect that.
Thank goodness for that. But I mean, that's all part of the relationship forming, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And let me tell you, I was tested. Wow. Because at the time that I entered agricultural extension, it was a male-dominated field.
Yes.
So I was sent out. I am from the south. I was sent to the southeast of the island, and I had to find ways of meeting with my farmers. And obviously, agriculture is a field job, so you're not going to meet the farmers in their offices.
No, no.
You have to go out on the field. So you better learn to hike. And Sylvia, you know Dominica. Dominica is mountainous.
Oh, yes.
So you have to be appropriate.
Back muscle.
Appropriately dressed, so that you could climb the mountains, cross the rivers, fall on your butt, get up, dust off, and keep moving.
Going. Wow. Wow. Wow.
With your knapsack on your back, because it doesn't make sense having a nice lady's handbag and all of that. That's embarrassing. And I can tell you that some of the older male farmers, they really tested me.
Wow.
They brought me to the most difficult places. And I remember clearly, I was with like 3 older gentlemen. I had to trust them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That I am safe with them, that they're not going to rape me or anything like that. Because I'd be in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knows me.
And
I am with these men.
Phones or any of these things were
No.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So then I remember that time we went to a particularly difficult place. It was very, very steep. Mm-hmm. And we traversed the area. And when we got back down to the road, one of the farmers told me, "Turn around, let me look at your butt." And I complied. And he's like, "She's a man." You notice she didn't fall at all? Mm-hmm. And some people, they have had to just go down on their bottoms, dragging. That girl, she's a man. Mm-hmm. And they respected me. Wow. They respected me. So despite the great age difference, yes, I guess I had a level of maturity.
Mm-hmm.
So I would speak openly with them. I would, if I didn't know something, I would openly say that I did not know,
Yeah.
but I can find out for you.
Yeah.
I also praised their own experience and knowledge because I insisted that there was a lot that I could learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I boosted their egos and interacted with them on that level so they began to trust me.
Mm.
And it was like the first few months was really focused on developing relationships.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
30 something years later, Sylvia, these farmers, those of whom are still alive,
Mm-hmm.
we still have a beautiful relationship
That
with
is
their
so.
children, with their wives, with the communities. I could go anywhere.
That is so important, and I think really helpful to hear. Even from the perspective of social work, we keep banging on about the centrality of relationships with
Yeah.
who we work with. These kinds of jobs cannot be done without putting relationships very much at the center.
It has to be up and center from very, very early. Because if you have a sour relationship, you're going to have a really, really hard time implementing your own program.
Okay, so thanks for that, Delia. I think some of my listeners will be extremely envious, to be honest, extremely envious of what you've just shared, because in a way, it sounds. I mean, I know it must have been tough, but it sounds really exciting,
No,
and
it is. It is.
and
So even at the end of the day, you're very tired,
yeah,
but you feel satisfied
mm,
that you have achieved something. And just to make them drool a little, Sylvia, so you can imagine after you've walked up the mountain and so on, the farmer picks a coconut and cuts that open straight from the tree, and you have that as a refreshing drink, or then he cuts a sugar cane
mhm.
and peels that for you, and so you're chomping on this, and some food cooked in the garden.
Oh, life is a dream.
Oh gosh, what else could one ask for?
Exactly, exactly.
And then when you're leaving, oh, you've got a bag of provisions to take home.
Yes, there's always a
Yeah,
gift,
so
a
you
gift of
don't you don't have
children.
to buy anything.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, that sounds lovely. So, Delia, tell us. Let's move on a bit more because you're just giving us a little snippet of
Yeah.
life and so on, and the trajectory of your career and so on. How have you moved into sort of more sort of counseling, advocacy, issues, social issues? How have you moved more into those arenas?
I feel that I am a marked woman. And no, 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 you're laughing, but this is my reality. And
Okay.
the reason that I say that is for some strange reason, people feel that they can talk to me.
Mhm,
So it is a very normal occurrence for a total stranger to just stop me
mhm,
anywhere
mhm.
and just lay their burdens on me. And sometimes I wonder, am I wearing something? Is there a sign on me somewhere that I don't see that tell them that this is the person you should talk to?
Yeah.
And so when I noticed that this was happening all the time, and somehow I do not have the heart to turn people away,
Mhm,
because I always think to myself, if I say to this person, I'm busy, I don't have time, and then most probably the person commits suicide or something like that, how am I going to feel? So I have had situations where I've had to call, I am on my way to a meeting and I have had to cancel. I mean, that doesn't speak very well for me. It doesn't happen all the time anyway. And so because I realized that somehow people are very comfortable confiding in me,
mhm,
then I said, okay, it means that I have something special. And even for those people who cannot articulate for themselves, if they tell me certain things, then I can represent them.
mhm,
And so I have basically thrown myself into all of this. My sister after me was born disabled. So that is where my being comfortable with disabled persons,
Yes.
that's where that stemmed from. And somehow I just always felt that people should not be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it really, I make it my business to speak up. So when there are things happening in society and people are so afraid, so you hear everybody grumbling,
Yes.
but nobody is brave enough to open their mouth and say, this is wrong and something needs to be done. Then there comes loudmouth Delia and making a holy stink so that people need to open their mouths and their eyes and realize something is going on. And at least even if we have just the discussion
Mm-hmm.
about it,
Mm-hmm.
that is better than everybody just mumbling among themselves. Let us talk about it. If there is something that we can do to take positive action, then let us do that. And so because of this,
Mm-hmm.
I have realized this is too much work for one individual anyway. So I have affiliated myself with mostly voluntary organizations, the
Yes.
Dominican National Council of Women, that focuses a lot on things to do with women and their families. And it takes a toll because it's voluntary work
Yes.
and there is very little support. And sometimes we, as the members of the organization, have to take from our non existent resources
Mm-hmm.
to help those who are worse off than us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Dominican National Council of Women. I am affiliated with the Association of Persons with Disabilities. I associate with the Dominica Cancer Society, giving psychosocial support to people affected with cancer. I look out for the elderly. And again, during the time that I was studying for my degree in social work, then I was on attachment at different government agencies. So I assisted them with the people with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at the welfare division, I built up a clientele who has stayed with me, although
Wow.
I am no longer at welfare.
Wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
I said to them, so I was there for a very short period. I said to all of them, I am just on attachment for a very short time. I will try my best to do what I can for you while I'm there. The time is up. I go back to my workplace and they show up at welfare. I want to speak to Mrs. Wicks. Mrs. Wicks is no longer with us. Where is she? She works at agriculture. Thank you. And they walk out and they come to my
My
office.
God. Wow. 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 Wow.
There is a need.
Yeah, absolutely. As there always is, and never enough resources. Never
Thank you.
resources.
So somehow I think I got pulled into social work, not necessarily by my own choice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but it just happened. The ducks were lined up, and that's it. And so, for example, at work, I am the mother figure.
Okay.
And yeah, everybody older than me, younger than me, they have a problem. This week, I can speak to you. Yes. Let's go into my private office. And guess where that is?
I, I don't even want to ask. Where is?
Somewhere in the bush, in the yard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we move out of the office setting, we find some sort of privacy,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm having a field day. Marital counseling, relationship counseling, personal health, everything.
Yeah. Right.
Delia is the go-to person.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I have been handled as part of the whole thing when people have their frustrations and they want to get it out. So there was this guy who was dealing with um, his girlfriend had a little miscarriage,
Wow.
and he was really, really torn up about this.
Mm.
And Doc, he just held on to me and he shook me up, inventing his frustrations. And everybody was coming, and I'm like, just leave him.
Mhm.
And when he was finished doing this, he fell on me and started crying. And I'm like, Lord, just strengthen my spine. And everybody knows you have a problem, find Mrs. Weeks.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that's certainly a reputation. Something you didn't mention in your summary, Delia, was your work on domestic violence, because this is another um, social issue I've heard you speak about as well. So, on top of everything else,
Yeah.
tell us a bit about what you're doing in that regard. Exhausting, eh? Exhausting.
No, because for some strange reason, certain things have become part of our system.
Mhm.
We don't see, we don't hear, we don't react. And for me, nobody needs to experience domestic violence. And because of the way that the Caribbean system is set up, then if he didn't kill you, what are you making a fuss about? And the way that our court system works very, very slowly is certainly not helping.
Yep.
And it comes down to economics.
Mhm.
So a woman may come to you, you can see she's been physically assaulted, and you don't make the decision for her. She has to make her own decision as to whether she goes or whether she stays. Because if you are to advise her that she should leave that relationship, when she's hungry, when she is feeling depressed or whatever, then she begins to blame you for having told her to get out.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I have to sit with them and talk about all the possible things that could happen, and allow them to make whatever decision that they make, but I pledge my support in whatever way that I can help.
Mm-hmm.
And I have witnessed domestic violence within my own family.
Yes.
So that is something that I decided from very early that I was not going to accept. And I feel that nobody has to accept that. I remember at one time I was acting as the director of Bureau of Gender Affairs. And I was on my way out of the office to a meeting, and this woman came into the office. And just looking at her, you could see she had been abused. So I just asked the secretary to cancel that meeting, and I took her into my little sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And after I introduced myself, I said to her, "Are you a drum?" And she looked at me like, and I asked her again, "Are you a drum?" And she is still confused. And I said to her, "Do you know what's a drum?" She says, "Yes." I said, "What do they do to drums?" "They beat them." "Are you a drum?" And she started crying.
Mm-hmm.
And even with that, she wasn't prepared to take any action.
No, no.
However, when I started explaining to her how domestic violence could affect her family, particularly her children,
Indeed.
that was the breaking point for her. Because the things that I told her could happen had started happening already. So the behavioral issues at school, and the school having to call, and this child had never been that way, but the children had witnessed the violence. And she left the office after we had spoken for a while. And a couple of days later, she came looking for me. And she said to me, "You are an angel. I want to thank you." So I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I left him. I went to another house that I owned. I had no furniture in there. I took my children, our clothes, and that was it. But that is the most beautiful night of rest I have had in a very long time."
Mm.
We put our clothes down on a sheet of plywood and all of us slept together, but I have never been so happy. And she was the one who made that decision for herself.
Mm-hmm.
And even with women who may make those decisions, but they're still struggling with all of the associated things. That is where the Dominican National Council of Women comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because when a woman is being violated, there has to be a system to provide some sort of safety, even in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have a domestic violence shelter in Dominica.
No, no, we don't.
We have been clamoring for it. Not even the Bureau of Gender Affairs, which is the government agency with that responsibility, has one. However, women, we are powerhouses. We are resourceful.
Of
So
course.
we have a system where we make contact with people who may have a space. It could be just a little bedroom that is free because your children are out of state. And would you be willing to allow us to use that room for a couple of days
Mm-hmm.
to tide somebody over? And a lot of people are willing. Sadly, though, sometimes a couple of days turns into months.
Well, yes, it does.
But this is our reality.
Yes, yes, yes.
So we try to assist people in the various ways that we can. And you imagine if I put somebody into your house, that is an additional expense on you. So I have to at least give you something
Yeah, to
to
contribute.
assist.
Mm-hmm.
And the something might have to come from my pocket. So I can no longer buy something for my husband or for myself
Mm-hmm.
because I have deprived myself, but all for a worthy cause.
Oh, wow.
And so we do that. And even in terms of giving that support to help you work through it. So we have to make ourselves available
Mm.
so that you can just talk, just get all of this toxic stuff out of your system. Some people are not comfortable talking, so we get them to draw or to write or whatever, but just to purge themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you something. Being exposed to all of these toxins, one of the things that has gotten me through is my faith.
Yes.
I pray a lot because initially I began absorbing the pain and the hurt
Well, you've heard
into my system.
vicarious trauma, and
Yeah.
a lot of us who work with some of these issues expose ourselves to. So I can imagine.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I began feeling depressed and physically sick until I checked myself. And I'm like, Delia, you're helping people to deal with this, but you cannot take on their burdens. So you have to find a way to lay it down. So I say to everybody, I have a little weed that grows close to the entrance of my house. And this is my trouble tree. So when I come from work, especially if I've had one of those days where people just burden me, nobody notices, but I touch my trouble tree. Mm-hmm. And what I'm actually doing, I am laying the troubles right there. I am not taking them home with me.
Oh. Very symbolic, yeah.
Yeah. I put the problems on the trouble tree. It is not a tree that I like, some flower that I'm going to nurture or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you can look miserable, that's fine. Because you are a trouble tree.
That's what you're there for. Oh, wow.
And then when I am going out in the morning, if I need to continue, I'll pick it up and I'll go with it. But you're not coming into my space. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you for that nugget.
You're most welcome.
Yeah. So, Delia, in terms of some of this, what I would consider to be extra work that you're doing and things that you've got yourself involved in terms of social issues, social challenges and problems and so on. Do you guys sort of engage in any sort of, and this is me being practical now, any fundraising? Are you getting any sorts of support, or in any way, shape, or form that um, that let's say listeners might want to contribute to? Who knows? Uh,
Well, it all depends on what is the hot button issue at the time and who brings it forward. So, for example, in 2013, when there was this rush of videos with young girls being sexually exploited, and one of the things that really got to me was the fact that there was a lot of victim blaming and shaming.
yeah.
And somehow I just could not understand, where is the logic? A 13 or 14-year-old girl is shown in a sexually explicit video, and you all are going on about, oh, she's been doing this for so long and she's a grown woman and all of this. And I'm like, we are really living in a sick society if we can actually vocalize these things. And so I didn't even think about it. I began a petition to collect signatures to ask for certain action. And the support was overwhelming.
Of course.
Certain things that we do, sometimes we're so busy dealing with the nitty-gritty on the ground that we don't have time to advertise what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
So people don't know and they can't support. However, based on the activities that are publicized for whichever organization, most times people come forward and contribute. Some people want to contribute publicly. Some people want to do it very silently, but there's a certain level of support from the general public. What is sadly lacking is the support from government. Because you would well know that government is interested in economics, what is going to bring money in, and helping people to deal with these issues does not appear to be bringing in money. So these areas that are so critical to the health of our nation, they are understaffed and underfinanced.
Yeah, which I think which is sadly a global phenomenon.
Yes, it is. But again, what I've noticed is that in those caring institutions,
yes,
it's mainly women.
Yeah.
And because sometimes we've been there, done that, or I've seen it happen to somebody else, we are able to innovate.
Yes.
And find ways to make things happen. So, for example, I am also associated with Lifeline Ministries, where we do a closed counseling module. It is actually a 10-week program where we encourage women to deal with traumatic issues through art and writing.
Wow, okay.
And I mean, it is just transformative.
Yeah.
You see people come in there and everybody is so closed up because they always think that they're the only ones going through it. And they may come there and then they listen to somebody else's story and then it resonates with them. And so they're speaking to each other and they're forming bonds while they're doing needlework, while they're making rugs, while they're making cushions. So you're not really focused on anybody looking at you, but we're just reading and we're sharing stories. And it may sound to somebody as very simplistic, but it's very, very therapeutic.
Yeah, and really powerful.
Yes, and what I have also noticed is that the women tend to bond. So you almost have like a buddy system coming out of it. Yeah. So even after the training is over, people still contact each other to try to find out how you're doing and all of that.
Fantastic. Well, in the absence of loads of resources, one has to be tenacious and creative and inventive. But it sounds as though the work is really, really powerful. Listen, Delia, I could spend the whole morning talking to you, but it's only probably coming up to 10 a.m. there. You need to get on with your day. But what I guess I'd really like to, and no doubt we will probably speak again because I know you're always involved in something.
Busybody.
I never said that. I never said that.
I did. It's a confession.
All right, accepted. All right. So we'll no doubt speak again. But I don't know if you have any sort of because one of the things, and we haven't got time for it now, but we will definitely do this again. I wanted to get your take on the Caribbean as a whole and some of the social issues that are around. But let's save that for another time.
Okay.
What I'd like you to sort of end with really is where you think you're at now in terms of who Delia Coffey is. You've had a long career, which seems to have taken so many very, very interesting turns, but you're a community person as well.
Yes, a young community person at that. Yeah?
I never said anything different, darling. I never said
No,
anything.
so the thing about it is that I plan to be here for a very long time.
Of course.
I do not intend to hang up my boots.
Good girl.
And the work continues.
Excellent.
So it means that looking ahead, there has to be mentorship. So we're trying to get other people into the space to do the work. As I told you, it was when I started helping people, it was more based on intuition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have gone ahead and I have gotten the proper qualification to assist.
Good.
And just last week, somebody said to me that I need to begin charging for my services. And I said, it is not that I don't need the money, but it cannot always be about the money.
Mm-hmm.
Because within our Caribbean environment, a lot of the people who need help can't afford to pay.
That's right.
So I have a support system.
Mm-hmm.
I will be taken care of. So I'm not worried about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I will continue contributing of my time to assist people, to get them over that rough patch.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes when you assist people, and for you, you haven't done anything, but people are so grateful.
It's your presence.
That you have an ally for life.
Presence, your willingness to be there. Sometimes people just need that.
Yeah. And then, Sylvia, what I find is that the harvest that I reap from these people in terms of emotional support, in terms of physical support, in the long run, is a lot more than what I would have gained if I had charged them $30 an hour or $60 an hour or whatever.
Absolutely.
So for me, it works. And I will continue being Delia. I do not have to be a millionaire. I have told God, I just want to be comfortable.
Lovely.
And comfortable for me is knowing that every night when I go to bed, that I can say, I have assisted at least one person to take a step in a positive direction. If it means sharing what I don't have, so be it.
Delia Coffey Weeks, as you can hear, we could speak to her for a lot longer. We will definitely have further discussions in the future. Absolutely fascinating woman. And Delia, I wish you all the best. I wish you good health and everything else that goes with that. And thank you so much for sharing a small part of your life with us today.
A very small part, because I'm a whole woman. But the work continues, Sylvia, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And whilst I know that the work that I'm doing is not unique, there are other people out there doing the same work. Mm-hmm. I just want to encourage them, because we understand the importance of what it is that we're doing. We're keeping our Caribbean nation together and healthy and sane,
Yes.
so that everything doesn't just crumble around us.
And on that note, goodbye for now.